What's up, Dorcas? Not a lot going on. I'm just sitting here trying to recover from the week of getting exhausted. Man, kind of worked my butt off this week, and I haven't had any energy to really do much this weekend. Just kind of did a little straightening up around here, but not much really. When it cools off a couple hours, I'll probably slip out there and put some more trim on the canoe. That's something. I got all that trim in the canoe. It's kind of in the way. And I think it would look a lot better if I put it on the canoe. Better and be out of the way. Yeah. I don't know how much power I have left in the drill, but I have some small drill bits. I got stainless steel screws. I got the point cut for one side at least. And I have a sawzall here. If the batteries manage to last through the task, I've had them kind of sitting for a week or so. I really need to get a new 18 volt battery, or maybe a little handheld spot welder would be in order actually, because I got tons of old batteries that need to be taken apart and gone through and check all the old cells, recharge them all individually, see which ones are bad and get rid of them and replace them with the good ones. And I don't see the point in throwing 20 batteries away when I can take 20 batteries apart and assemble 5 good ones out of the parts. Susan, welcome back. Got 9 or 10 people in here now. What's going on is let me go ahead and switch the settings. Oh, yeah. I missed it. Thank you, Dorcas. So that little alligator was hanging around for a few days. I had to scare him off a couple times. He kept coming back thinking I was going to feed him or something. I've never seen a baby gator that bold. I think he must have got a hold of one of my dinner scraps or something one day and I didn't realize it or something, because he just, I got to be more careful with the scraps now, because the young gators are hatching and they haven't developed a fear of humans yet. So I just made sure, hi Adrian, I just made sure to scare him, make him think I'm trying to eat him, and that should help put a good healthy fear of humans in him so he doesn't go up to humans looking for food. Yeah, I came home one day and he was sitting out here on the pontoon. The other day I was sitting here chilling watching TV and he crawled up on the pontoon next to me knowing I was there. And that's what really set me off to look, I gotta scare this guy. Because they just don't act like that. Well, okay, there's a possibility that he's just, just young and dumb. And he just doesn't know fear yet. So either way, whether he got my scraps or whether he's just fearless little youngin, he needs to be like, it's kind of like when I worked at an orchard and there was a bear and a mama bear with her cub that would come into the orchard and raid the orchard for fruit. I would always chase them out of the field and act like I was wanting to eat them alive. because we had a lot of workers that would come out to the field, and I didn't want them to get hurt. So just as long as they're afraid of humans, that's good. But at the same time, when I ended up accidentally found myself between Mama and her cub, there was no chasing her away. I looked at the situation. She stood up and roared at me, and I looked and realized that where I was between them, and I'm like, okay, oh, I see, and showed respect and backed out from between them, and there was no conflict. You know, like, you're not gonna bluff a mama bear when her cub is on the other side of you. But any other time, like in the day and stuff, I would chase them out. And the same with the gators. You can't let them get comfortable around the people and thinking we're all buddies. Like, if it was just me in the wilderness alone and it was a bear, I'd probably make friends with him just like a dog. But not near civilization, not where people go, not especially not here with alligators. Alligators do not train like dogs, okay? If you feed them, they do not become docile. They will still eat you, even if you've been feeding them all day, every day. All you're doing is reinforcing the idea in their mind that humans are a source of food. And that is no bueno. So anyway, I just want to stress that if I'm out here showing people close-ups of gators, and that kind of thing will happen naturally. I mean, animals are curious too. It could have just as easily been an iguana, but if it was a little green iguana, same size, hell, even bigger, I wouldn't have chased it off, because they're not going to ever become a problem. As far as, like, yeah, they're an invasive species, but they're not going to go attacking humans for food. Even if you were feeding one, they're more of a kind of creature that would come up politely begging, rather than come and, like, bite your leg if you don't feed them. Whereas an alligator, yeah. Hey, Dice, welcome back. An alligator's a whole different creature. And they don't really, especially as they get bigger, they really don't have fear. Like, man, it's hard to explain. Like, they do have fear, but they don't. Once a gator gets upwards of 15, 16 feet, they don't really fear anything around here anyway. And so it's best if they just don't consider humans as a source of food, and then we're just kind of like irrelevant to them. They just float by and kind of eye us from a distance, and that's fine. I'm just lecturing, Dice, in case you just walked in. I got some recent close-ups of a baby gator that's been really super curious and extraordinarily bold around me, which I kind of guessed that would happen when I plopped myself in here, and that's kind of was the intent of blending into this area. But at the same time, I'm explaining why, the intricacies of why I would chase him off after all that. All this work to get a close-up, and then I'm going to chase him off right away, because, yeah, because of all that. But, like, for instance, in Hollywood, I took a picture of that big iguana. He was like 5 feet long when I saw him on my kayak, and I jumped in the kayak and paddled all the way back to my 40-foot boat with the iguana still on the kayak, and I climbed up in the boat, put all my groceries in, and climbed on board, and that iguana was still sitting there on the front of the kayak, I thought any minute he's going to jump off, but he just didn't. Okay, so, I figured, well, I'll come out in the morning, he'll be gone. And the next morning I came out, and indeed he was gone from the kayak. So I thought he was gone. But it turned out he had climbed up the bow line onto the boat and made his way into one of the lazarettes and decided that was his new home. DVD, you're collecting DVDs. Yeah, man, I could see collecting vinyl records, but not DVDs. That doesn't. No, man, get a get a hard drive with a few hundred terabytes and store all your DVDs on it, and then maybe make a copy of it and throw those freaking discs away, man. That's old technology that doesn't. It's not more high quality. Like a vinyl, a vinyl's quality is that there's a an analog sound coming off of it rather than a digitally mastered sound. It's actual music. I don't know how to explain it. Like, there's just nothing like the analog sound of a vinyl record playing. You can't really reproduce that electronically. But when it comes to movies, man, you're not getting better quality out of a disc than you are out of a hard drive. But you can store a lot more in a small space with a hard drive, and discs get scratched and ruined and warped over time. I don't know, man. The hard drive, SATA hard drive, you can stick it out in the rain and snow for a year, and then bring it in and dry it out for 3 weeks and plug it in, and it still have all your data and still function. You know? Yeah, I never had an iguana as a pet. I had friends that did. I kept other reptiles, but I had one came and lived with me on the boat. Like I said, it was just a wild iguana. I had friends, wild iguana friends that just got friendly with me, where I used to kayak every day. And maybe it was because a lot of times I'd see them struggling trying to climb up the seawall. Like, they'd get in the water and the tide would go out so low they couldn't get back out to their normal place. And a lot of times I would scoop them up on my paddle and help them up the seawall. And I think maybe they recognized me or something over time. They just got used to coming up to me and not being afraid of me. Yeah, they are pretty much from, actually, really kind of from Sebastian Inlet south. Even, maybe not Sebastian so much. That's more like you'd see more of those red-headed African red-headed agama lizards, but not as much as far as iguanas. They're there, but not. You don't see them everywhere. It's like here in Fort Lauderdale, they're around, but not like Miami and south. When you go to Miami, Biscayne Bay, and south of there, man, they're just everywhere. They're running out from under you as you run down the sidewalk. If you run down a sidewalk, like, it reminded me of Washington, D.C. If I'd run down the sidewalk late in the evening, like doing a jog, rats would be running out from under my feet, And in Florida, it's lizards running out from under your feet. You're like almost tripping on yourself trying not to step on them. And then you get to Miami, and the lizards get to be 6 feet long, and and they don't run out from under your feet necessarily. They might stop and turn around and bite your foot. But on cold days, like, you'd be walking around in a big ass iguana will just fall out of the tree and splat right on the sidewalk in front of you, and it can't move, and it's just kind of stuck there until it warms up. And you could pick them up, and I wouldn't recommend bringing them straight home. Like, if you wanted to keep one, I would say, first of all, make sure it's a Florida indigenous. Otherwise, you need some kind of permit, or you need to be harvesting it. But you're not allowed to keep it as a pet without a special permit now. But second of all, they have mites and all kinds of parasites, so you wouldn't want to ever handle a wild lizard and then go handle somebody's pets, like especially birds or other reptiles, amphibians. So you'd want to put them in isolation and put a mite killer inside there with them, and like it takes a couple weeks for that to take effect and kill all the mites. Or you could give them a couple mite rinses to get rid of any mites, and then clean the entire encasement that they're in with mite killer. And you'd want to treat them for parasites, just like you would a dog that you took in from the wild. You'd have to treat them for, fleas and parasites, worms, etc. Same thing with lizards, only they tend to carry parasites that are more, infect lizards and other reptiles, amphibians, and birds are closely related. Like the same mites that infect lizards will also infect birds, because the scales and the feathers are very similar in composition. Oh yeah, the tail can whip you. And their teeth can be nasty too when they get that size. Even the herbivorous ones have not so much teeth, but more like these serrated edges inside their jawline. And they got some pretty nasty claws too. They're no joke. But I hear the green ones taste a lot like chicken. They call them chicken of the trees. Like we call tuna chicken of the sea. Like these Cubans come up here, they're like, yeah, that's chicken of the trees, man. And from what I hear down south, or actually anywhere in Florida, there may be a bounty on them certain times a year, because I know there's been people that hunt them not just for food, but man, I say leave them alone. At least the green ones, leave them alone. Like the red ones, the ones that come from South America, the aquatic iguanas, the rock iguanas, if they're like black and blue colored, they're different. But the arboreal ones, I believe that's how it goes. I could have it backwards. You have to look it up. Don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure it's the green arboreals. There's also a green arboreal that's not from Florida. Like there's a difference between the South American and the Floridian indigenous iguana. I don't know, but I don't hunt them, so it's not really relevant to me until I get really hungry. And I assume that'll be like a total system collapse situation wherein it won't matter. Like, those poaching laws don't really apply if there's no grocery store. You're Iggy. You're kidding. On his leash? Well, what's he doing out on a leash without? See, he's not really on the leash if you're not holding the other end of it. You know? Yeah, I used to have a python that I would take to me with me to the springs, and I would get up on the dive platform and throw the snake into the pool, and then dive in after her and swim around with her, and let her have a swim. And it freaked people out. Like, they didn't understand that the snake doesn't run away really fast. She's totally tame, completely captive bred. She loves me to death. And we would swim together all the time until they kicked us out of the spring because it scared people. I'm like, she's just a baby. She's only 12 feet long. What are you scared of? Like, saw a pretty big pike fish come through here yesterday too. That's one of those that comes by. They stalk and hunt, but they don't really like stay in the area necessarily. Or if they do, it's a bigger area anyways. Like the snappers I've shown you, the sheep's head, the mutton snappers, the mangrove snappers, these are all like they don't really leave this cove. Well, yeah, but some of them are transient, and some of them, like that guy, he just lives here. And this, like, he don't go more than 50 yards away from that spot he's in right now. And I don't know if you can see him through that glare, but there's definitely, he's about 8 or 10 inch. He's still not really, but there, I mean, you can see his little lips right under that shadow. If I sit up, he'll back off. Gets intimidated when I sit up. There's a bunch of mutton snappers hiding out under me. I think they'll hide under the boat when it's hot out. Here, let me see. Might be able to see them better under the shade. There's one. Little mutton snappers. Those are little babies. Yeah, it's still just too much glare to see. There's a... What is that guy? Anybody know what that fish is? There went a mutton snapper. Ooh. And there went a whole bunch of them. They're coming around. They're like, what's the deal? Is he dumping food? Yeah. That's what I'm saying. That's why I don't go fishing here. I don't think he's a sheep's head. A sheep's head have two big front teeth, like buck teeth. They have the stripes like that, but they're actually tend to be more like bright white. I think. More brilliant white than that. It's another fish that resembles a sheep's head, but I forget what it's called. No, the mullet will come through in schools. They'll swim up and down the stream and come through here feeding on the vegetation when the water's clean. And then there'll be game fish chasing those schools. But like I said, like they roam the whole river basin. Whereas these snappers tend to just roam this one little cove. And that's what kind of makes them off limit to me. These fish, they've already kind of adopted my dinner scraps as a source of their food. And it's not fair for me to fish for them at that point. See how he comes right up to the boat and he's not afraid of me. It wouldn't be fair for me to toss in a hook with some bait on it. That's not sporting. And I'm not starving, so I wouldn't do that. You know how I do, Susan. If I'm going to go fishing, I'll go down around and out of the cove and up the river or something. Or I'll go after one of the transient fish that's just happening through here. Or, like the herbivorous fish. Those are fair game. Mullet, they're fair game. Doesn't matter how you harvest them. Well, you got to catch them with a net because they don't bite any bait you throw out. But they're just fair game, just any size. They're numerous. They're all over the place, and pretty much that's what all the other game fish eat, and the birds. Like everything wants a good clean mullet. Including me. Oh man, I've seen everything from snook to amberjacks, crevalle jacks, you name it, everything's going after a mullet. Yeah, well, there's going hungry and then there's actual starving. Most people in America, a lot of times when they get really hungry, will say, oh my God, I'm starving. And what they mean is they haven't eaten in hours. And they generally don't really know the meaning of starving. Unless they've done like a week-long fast or something. Like, you're right, there's no reason. Look, there's no reason anyone in the USA should ever go hungry. And there's no reason anyone in the USA should ever feel like they have to eat out of the garbage. I'm not saying you can't find a good meal in the garbage at times in the right key places and stuff. I'm just saying, don't ever feel like that's your only option, because it really isn't. Like, if you live in a town, there is a place every week that gives away a free meal if it's a small town, like a little country town. And in those places you can meet people that will, like if you go there and you're like trying to apply some of your skills or trade, somebody there will put you to work and give you a spot to be, give you a chance, And if you live in a big major city, there's free food. Just, you have to go find a bum somewhere and ask them where the next free meal is. And there's generally one within maybe walking distance or a bus trip of where you are. Like, so there's no reason to steal in America. There's really no reason to steal. Like, just it makes more sense to go stand in line and get a free meal than to steal something. Like, you think it's humiliating to stand in line at the homeless shelter and get a free meal? Imagine how humiliating it is to be getting arrested because you couldn't afford that freaking meal. Like, seriously, like, if you live in a place where there is no town and there is no free meal, you can go door to door in this country knocking. And the first two people might call the cops on you, but like within 10 knocks, you're going to get somebody giving you some food and something to do for work, or like trying to figure shit out for you. Because it's just like that. This is, it's a land of, like decades of people living lifetimes of plenty. So, when it comes to going out in nature, look, man, it's one thing to learn the skills to like make a fish trap and set up traps in the forest and stuff, but and when your life depends on it, all the rules go out the window. Like, you see something that's protected and it's like you're not really worried about the law so much as you are about the morality of it. Like, and your stomach really kind of dictates the level of your morality. but but don't lose sight of, when you're out there trying to like prove your skills as a woodsman, don't lose sight of the fact that we're trying to keep a decent going, like flourishing ecosystem. And most of the rules out there are there for good reason. Like, they regulate shit. If they're telling you not to hunt that species, there's probably a good reason. Like, you should probably just stick with it. Follow the rules, look up the rules of your area and follow them. Because there's just no need to cheat the rules in the U.S. where there's sources of food everywhere. There's work. If you look, you can find some work. It may not be what you want, but it'll be all you want. It's not a life and death situation, and don't ever intentionally put yourself in a life and death situation just to prove you can survive it. That's just, there's no need for that. You come out here, we can go land the boats on an island and pretend we're stranded on a desert island, but in the back of our minds, we got that emergency radio, we got that contact, we got, whatever. We got all the gear we need to survive. We've already scouted it out. We're just showing like a what if scenario. Like, don't go dropping yourself off in the middle of the Arctic with no shoes just to prove you can survive it. Don't do that to yourself. It's dumb. If you're a survivalist, be an actual survival teacher and teach people the right way to survive is don't get caught in those situations without shoes. Like, you should never be anywhere near the Arctic without shoes. For any reason ever. Yeah, I am referencing Cody Lundeen going out into the Arctic with no shoes like an idiot. Like, that's fine if you got thick calluses on your feet and you live in the desert. That's fine. I get the whole point of going slow. I've done the barefoot thing for years, man. I get the whole earthing barefoot, building your mitochondria thing. But some things, you just don't go into the Arctic without shoes, no matter how good your feet are or how strong you think your mitochondria is. You don't go into the Arctic with no shoes. And you don't go into the jungle with no shoes. And I know there's a lot of people that are going to, well, there's all these jungle bunny people born and raised out in the jungle that live all their lives with no shoes. And I get that. And that's true. But they're also born into a village with a tribe. And they have trails established. And they know what creatures are out there and where their domains are. And you don't. And you're trekking through uncharted, no trail jungle. Like you're making the trail yourself. That's different. You're exploring unknown territory. That's a whole different thing than exploring around your freaking teepee where you were born. You know, where your family raised you. That's a whole different thing than jumping in a raft and going down an unknown river in a country you've never been in before. And no, you put some dang boots on and you bring some bug netting and you play it smart. And the reason why, there's just too many things out there in the Amazon jungle that want to bite and kill you. And a lot of them don't want to bite and kill you, but when you're tromping through thick jungle, there's plants that will kill you just poking into your skin. And there's lots of them. And what you're doing is making yourself a liability for your partner. Like you can't run to his rescue. And he's got to basically be leading the way, tromping down the jungle ahead of you to pave the way for you the whole way. And that's not survival. That's like you riding your partner's coattails through the woods. You know, that's not, I mean, if you're unintentionally thrown into such a situation where your boots got destroyed in the crash, whatever, you know, it's, yeah, your partner got to help you through it, but you shouldn't intentionally, just to prove you can survive it, do that to your partner, ever. That's stupid. But at the same time, I gotta admonish Dave for agreeing to it. Like, why would you even agree to go with someone into the Arctic with no shoes on? I would say no. I would just flat out no. Like, you gotta find some super mitochondria boosting boots or find some other sucker to drag you through the Arctic and make sure you survive. But I am not going with you into the Arctic when you're wearing shorts and no shoes. I just wouldn't do it. You know, I thought it was funny early on in the episodes, he was teaching people, you know, he drank water straight out of a stagnant pool in the desert and got sicker than a dog. And then when they went up into the cold mountain spring where there's no civilization, there's no bird turds and lizards and rats everywhere pooping in it. It's a fresh stream of snow melt off the mountain coming through the rocks and filtering through a quarter mile of plants. And it's like some of the cleanest water on the planet. He freaks out and he's telling Dave, no, you're going to get sick if you drink that live water. Oh my God, oh, you're just going to have me out here taking care of you, and because you're going to. And Dave didn't get sick. And you know what? I've drank live water out of a lot of springs in Florida, Illinois, Oregon, Washington. I've drank live water in many places, not in a stagnant pool in the desert. That's just dumb. That's really dumb. But it's like, man, he learned that lesson so hard he forgot that there are some exceptions to that rule that he should have followed when he was in the desert. Oh man. Out here there's a whole different element involved in getting clean water. You see where I'm at right now, this is all so saturated in salt that it doesn't matter if you boil it. If you boil it, it's even saltier. You can kill all the germs, but the more you boil it, the saltier it gets. So you can't just boil the germs out of the water. You got to desalinate it if you're going to drink this water. Now, good luck figuring out how to improvise a desalinator. That lesson is coming up in a future video. How to improvise a desalinator with a couple drinking straws and a coconut. Or two. And I'm not joking. Like, I have a little miniature survival kit that contains the things I need to make an emergency desalinator with just either what's in nature or what's around or what I have on hand. And I'm not talking about these, like, a lot of people will say, oh, here's my emergency desalinator, and they got this little plastic thing that they put salt water in, and it uses the sun to evaporate, and it makes like a half a pint of water in a day if it's really good and pretty large. And like, that's enough to wet your whistle at the end of the day. But that is not enough to sustain you if you're trying to build a raft to get off the island, or you're trying to build a shelter to survive storms, or, you know, if you're really exerting any energy, you're going to need more water intake than what you can get out of a small solar still. That's just enough to get you through the first day, you know, to find your water source. But you need an actual steady water source to survive long term, you know. And coconuts are not really a good, I mean, you see this a lot in survival shows of people just like, okay, I'm going to spend 3 days on this island surviving. There's no water. There's only these coconuts. And you'd be surprised at, if they show up, you'd be surprised at what they got to go through to get those coconuts. It's not what you think. And what they don't tell you is that after 3 days of drinking nothing but coconut water, they got some serious Hershey squirts coming out the back end. And like, you need a better source of water, because those coconut waters are going to make you squirt all, you're going to get dehydrated just from having diarrhea if that's all you drink. That's the part they don't tell you. The other part they don't tell you is there's something about coconut trees that the jungle bunnies that climb them have these massive calluses on their hands and feet, and they understand there's a certain way of climbing them because the surface of the tree is covered in little spikes that point upward. And if there's any slight amount of slipping downward as you're climbing up that tree or climbing down the tree, all these spikes go into your skin deep. They embed into your skin and then break off in there. And they're horrendous. You can't see them, but when you climb up the tree, you'd sure as hell feel it. And so you better have some shoes on, some long pants, and your leggings tied down to where they're not going to slip up on you while you're climbing. Like, if you don't have all that, at the very least, protect your hands and feet and make sure you don't slip. Like, before you lose your strength up there holding on for dear life trying to cut the coconuts down and coax them to fall, you're going to also find out most of them fall and break on their way down. So, like, you're going to lose a lot of... you better build a nice soft pad for them to land on underneath so they don't break when they hit the ground. Or it's a lot of wasted effort. Like... unless you just happen to have that one tree that's leaning down, that's full of coconuts and replenishing every day, that's so low to the ground that you can just jump up and grab a few. Like, it's not as easy as you think. Until you've tried it, don't put yourself in a situation where that's your only plan for hydration. But now, on the other hand, I'll tell you what, coconut, the tree itself, and the leaves on them, not just the coconuts, but the leaves and the branches are a very valuable resource for all kinds of cool stuff. From making sandals to hats to fish traps, making all kinds of stuff really quickly. Coconut leaves are ideal for weaving. And the branches. The whole leaf, they're awesome for all kinds of fibers. The coconut itself, you can actually boil water in it. So if you have the metal tube, you can turn the coconut with the husk into like a basin to put salt water in and boil off the water collected on the condenser side. And using fire, you can increase your amount of water supply. Get enough to make it actually worth doing rather than just hoping for the sun to do enough in a day. The better option is if you can get a metal container. And even better, a metal container that you can fasten a metal tube into the top of it and seal that. If you can seal it, you can add water, seal it closed with the metal tube in it at the top, then you have a way to distill a lot of water really fast. I'm just saying, if your only plan is to climb that coconut tree. Well, first of all, let me say, if it says it's a 3-day challenge on YouTube, that's not a challenge. That's a 3-day guarantee. That's not a survival challenge. That's a survival almost guarantee. Because, like, something has to really go wrong for you to lose your life in 3 days. 3 days just happens to be the amount of time you can go without water. So that's not really a challenge. That's just like, you know, come get me in 3 days, make sure I don't die. And if you do anything right, you're going to do at least a little better than die. So it's not really a challenge per se. Those guys that do shows like Alone, as much as I could talk smack about a lot of them, that's no BS. That is a challenge. Even though they got that satellite phone, that is a serious challenge. To go into some environment like that with only 10 items and try to live long term. Ooh, yeah. Which items would you pick? If you had to go into Alaska, into the wilds of Alaska with only 10 items, in the most densely populated bear territory in the country, where you know it's going to snow in the winter, you know what? I went through the first season. I listed all the 10 items that everyone brought. And there's one item that I would have brought that none of them brought. And that's a shovel. I don't remember one contestant bringing a shovel. Or if they did, it was some cheesy fold-up shovel. But one of them would be a house. I laughed when I watched that one guy. The one guy was walking up the trail, and I think he had spotted a bear or thought he heard a bear earlier on, and then he's walking up the trail and he sees one coming toward him the opposite direction, and he freaking runs around it, and the bear keeps going the other direction. He ran all the way back to camp freaking out and like practically in tears. He couldn't sleep all night. He called for a rescue, but of course they couldn't come get him till the next day. So like the next day he's like calling for a rescue. And I'm just like, dude, the counter is long over with, and the bear already went around you and left you alone. Why are you still tripping? Did you not think that was going to happen at some point when you put yourself into that environment where you know there's bears everywhere? Like, wow. I know that's scary, but damn, man, you already got the approval of the bear for your presence there. Like the fact that he didn't maul you right then and there is him saying, okay, like all we got to do is learn each other's schedule and not confront each other on the trail. You know, and then one guy gave up because he got wore out before he could get a shelter built, because he's trying to build a big, huge freaking log cabin for a family of 3. And it's like, damn, dude, you're digging in clay with a stick. And you're cutting logs that like normal people would get an ox to drag through the woods. Like, Think you bit off more than you can chew, bro. And there was like three of them that built the shelter and then built the fireplace without thinking of a chimney first. And they, or maybe they just planned it from the beginning, but they made a wooden chimney. A wooden chimney for long-term habitation. They made a fire pit with a wooden chimney and then acted confounded when their shelter caught on fire in the middle of the night and they had to call for a rescue. And I'm like, what were you thinking when you made your chimney out of wood? Oh my God. Oh, wow. Yeah, I don't know if that really qualifies as an oxymoron, but yeah, it was definitely a dumb move. Maybe not an oxymoron, but just a regular moron. But yeah, I mean, okay, if I were in that situation, my priorities would be like, first of all, I'm looking for a source of water not too far from camp, but not too close, because water, all the wild animals go to fresh water, and so you don't want to be too close to that, but you don't want the journey to the water side to be too extensive either. You know, it's a lot of work carrying water. So that's what you're hoping for, but you might not find that right away. So like right away, I'd be like putting up a temporary shelter until I found such water. You know, a freshwater source. And then I'd start on my long-term shelter, you know, scout that area for a good spot. As far as the building it though, you put up your temporary shelter near the site and you build the fire pit. And while you're digging around in the area, you're collecting rocks. And you use those rocks. And if you find clay, even better. You use those rocks and clay to make a freaking stone fire pit with a stone chimney. And then you build your shelter around that, based on that. But that's your first thing, is the chimney. And it needs to be clay or stone or something that doesn't burn. And, you know, wood, if you line the inner side with clay, is fine for a day or two. But not for weeks and months, because that clay inside cracks. And then the flames lick on the wood structure, and then that catches fire. And pine is extremely flammable. And especially if all you're burning is pine, you're creating tons of creosote when you burn that pine. And you got to consider, like, maybe even cleaning the chimney after 6 months of burning that shit, because you're going to get a flash fire in it, even if it is rocks and clay. So just the creosote buildup can flash fire. And so you definitely can't make a long-term chimney out of wood. And then the idea of having a fire pit inside your shelter and no chimney, and just thinking the smoke's just going to funnel out the door, that's even dumber. Like, you're just asking for a lung full of like, how are you going to live in that when it gets cold? No. It's not a viable shelter for a cold environment. Like in some moderate environments, there's shelters you can build where you can put the fire outside. You can heat rocks and carry them inside, but then you got to have more rocks getting hot while these are getting cool in your bed, and you got to switch them out and throughout the night, and you got to keep that fire going. But you still got to go outside to stoke the fire, and that doesn't make sense when you can. It's worth the effort to find the rocks, the right rocks, and that's a trick too. You get the wrong rocks and they explode. Like it's a lot of people make the mistake of going to the river to get their rocks. And yeah, those are nice, smooth, easy rocks to work with. It's easy to find a lot of big, smooth rocks without having to dig them out of the dirt. But those rocks have spent centuries underwater and they're moist. And you put them in a fire pit where they get super dry and hot and they shatter. And then, of course, there's flint rocks that they actually can ignite and shatter and explode on you. So, like, there's certain rocks you can use that just, man, if it's any kind of volcanic, then that's excellent. Like, that's already been superheated. It's not going to overheat from your fire pit. It might crack a little here and there, but the clay will generally, like clay and mud, help hold it up. I've made all kinds of big fire pits and ovens with just clay and mud, or even just clay. Like you can make a little wood form to make the clay and then fire it to get it hot and let it form and then pull the wood out. And then when it starts cracking from shrinkage and stuff, you just keep adding more layers of clay on it. And if it's shaped right, it'll still hold. You might have a little crumbling here and there, but you'd be surprised at what you can do with just clay or even just dirt and mud. Like even if it's not really good clay content, yeah, nah, when it comes to those bitter cold winters in northern climates, you really need to have a fireplace inside. It's really worth taking the extra time to make a fire pit and to keep a pile of wood stacked, already split and ready ahead of time. Like you actually should have your firewood cut before winter sets in. Like enough to get you through the winter. And yeah, I mean, I'd probably set up a temporary lean-to during the warm months, but be constantly working any extra time you have. I mean, obviously, you got to get your trap lines set and your food coming in before you run out of energy. Like, obviously, you've already figured out the water situation. Like, that's why you picked that spot. So, assuming you got your water situation sorted out, your next, you already have a little temporary lean-to that's okay for the season, but it's not going to get you through the winter. But in order to build that winter shelter, you need some food energy, so you can't be running out of gas in the middle of it. That's the real trick, is balancing, getting enough food coming in. And you also got to consider food preservation and storage. And that is probably the most challenging thing for anyone, even the experts out there. You'll find that, like, even the guy, like, man, the dude that won the first round, the first year and the second year, one of the biggest challenges they had was fighting predators off from their meat stash. Preserving the meat and then somehow storing it in such a way that the predators can't get to it, and neither can the germs. And that's a feat. And it's like, you really don't want to, you can't make a bear proof shelter out of what's out there in the time you have. What you're making is a bear resistant shelter. And so if you bring your food storage inside that shelter, you're risking getting mauled by a bear by baiting bears into your shelter. So basically, if you build anything less to store your food in, anything less secure than what you built to live in, sure, it needs to, basically, you got to build another brick and like brick reinforced log cabin, but in miniature, that stays cold with no fire pit out there to keep the bears out, and bears will dismantle it. And like putting it in a tree, you build a platform. There's no platform that you can build and climb that a bear and a wolverine can't climb. And there is no tree you can climb that a bear can't climb or break down. Like if it's thick enough for the bear to climb, he'll climb it. And if it's thin enough to break, he'll just break the tree down and still get it. But there's absolutely nothing you can climb that a wolverine can't climb. So the idea of hoisting it up somewhere to keep it away from those creatures out there is kind of futile. You're just, you can't harvest anything more than what you can eat in that day or two without having some secure from a big scary animal kind of food storage and food preservation. So all of that, like, you need a smoker to preserve the fish and the meat, and then you need basically a food locker, a cold storage food locker, and it needs to be outside your shelter but close enough to where you can defend it. Like, you hear something getting at it at night and you can jump out there and scare it off. I mean, that's the real challenging thing. Because to survive that kind of winter, you really need to put away some food. You can't rely on getting your daily food every day. And so therein lies the challenge of overcoming the nature around you, is in not just preserving it, but keeping it away from the other critters that are determined to get it. When you don't have an actual steel reinforced concrete food cellar. You need to be thinking of, if you're ever in that situation and it's like you don't know if rescue is ever coming, you don't have a sat phone, you need to be thinking along those lines. You need to be thinking of all these things before winter sets in. You need to resolve all these issues, or you won't make it. And that's part of the reason I stay in the subtropics. At least for the winters. Down here, there's a lot less to worry about. Yes, hats off, rocks do absorb moisture. So does concrete and bricks. You see a lot of people make a fire pit out of cinder blocks. I don't recommend doing that. It's okay, sort of, not even really for one use. It really depends on the moisture content of the bricks and the heat of the fire, and but you put a big pot of water up on top of cinder blocks to boil, and those cinder blocks hit the right temperature and shatter, and that whole big pot of water falls into a pit full of coals and splatters everywhere, and people get injured. Cinder blocks are not made to withstand the heat of a constant fire, and they absorb a lot of moisture. Take a dry cinder block that's been sitting out in the sun for weeks without rain hitting it, and put it out in the middle, stand it up or lay it on its side, and take a gallon of water and slowly pour in a few ounces at a time onto the top of the brick. And you'll see it absorb into the brick. And if you keep pouring a little at a time, you can actually put an entire gallon of water into that brick without spilling a drop. When that brick's dry enough, on a hot enough day, you can dispense an entire gallon of water into it without spilling any. And it'll absorb it almost like a sponge. And then it becomes really brittle and easy to break. That's why cinder blocks are made to fill with concrete and steel, and fire bricks are made for fireplaces, and paving bricks for paving. Like, there's a different composition to them. You know, if you're not really sure if the rock you have is one, like, one of the things you can do is take another rock and strike that rock really hard with a sharp point from another rock, and then smell it. And if it smells at all like sulfur, or you get any sparking, don't use that rock for your fire pit. It's probably flint. Okay? And also strike it and see if it shatters into sharp edges easily. If you're thinking of using that as the top surface, like to span a gap, you got this nice flat long rock, and those come in real handy when you're building a fire pit and you're trying to make a nice big hearth. Test it with some heat, or set it up in such a way that if it does break, it doesn't cave in the whole structure. Like, that's really the wise thing when you're doing the whole trial and error thing with building fire pits with rocks. Just play it safe and use smaller rocks, and use more of like a arch structure, like with a keystone structure, so that if one of the rocks cracks, it's not that big of a deal, and you can just keep filling in the cracks with clay or mud. It usually takes a good season or two with a clay and rock structure. You want to have a bucket of soft clay in your shelter too, because over time those fires are going to start creating smoke leaks through the hearth from the clay starts shrinking, and you need to be constantly filling in the cracks, or else you'll fill your whole structure with smoke. You might, if you actually, there is a way to make a shelter in a cold environment that has a fire pit in the middle with no chimney, and make it draft. But you have to understand how drafting works in such a structure, and you got to understand how to trap heat in while still allowing it to draft out. And that's a trick. Like, study how teepees are built, and it's kind of a good hint. If you've ever lived in a real actual teepee that's made for winter, you'll notice that they have the poles up in a traditional teepee shape, And the skins that go over those poles on the outside don't go all the way to the ground. They'll be a few inches off the ground down at the base. And then there's another skirt along the inside of the poles all around that. And it goes from the ground up above the skins on the outside. And what it does, it creates a little heat trap that's everything ankle high and up is trapping heat in, and everything, it allows air to pull in under that vent and siphon down into the fire pit that's in the middle, and then the heat of it pulls the smoke straight up out through the flaps. And that's a pretty effective way of warming a teepee. Like, you can have a 25-30 foot area, plenty of living space, cooking space, and once in a while you get a little smoke billow in your face, but for the most part it just goes straight up. And the poles in the front, you look on a teepee, you'll notice there's two poles at the very front of the entrance that form like a V shape, and right next to the doorway and the door flap. And those two poles can be adjusted to change the pitch and shape of the cone at the top, to block wind in certain ways and direct it in other ways to help it funnel out. And it's actually a really well thought out structure, believe it or not. Like, those natives had it down. The thing is, if you're just trying, it's not really wise to start out trying to build a teepee, because you're not going to have the skins to line it on the first year. You need a tanning station and a whole village full of leather tanners to make that teepee. Yeah, sandbag domes, blankets, they work, but consider, we're talking about a show where you can take 10 items and then you got to work with what's out there. So pretty much it's going to be rocks, clay, mud, and logs. And like the one guy gave us that example of, it's like you really want to minimize the size and the freaking size of the material you're cutting, because you're talking about a lot of work. Also, the bigger your structure, the more space you have to heat. I really like how the one guy dug into the side of a hill and then cut drainage around and then laid a floor in above that. And, he made it to where that whole entire hillside adds thermal mass to the structure. It made it where there's half as much work to build the chimney. By putting it in the corner, he's already got 2 dirt walls to work with. And, one wall and 2 sides is halfway under dirt. So there's really only 1 wall and a door in the front, with 2 half walls on the sides to build in the roof. It was a lot of work digging into the side of the hill. But in the long term, that was a way better way of setting it up. So I've been looking around. I haven't seen that baby gator in a couple days. I think I successfully scared him off. And that's good. If you missed the earlier episode, I had a little baby gator getting a little too curious, and I just want to make sure he stays away from humans, doesn't get too comfortable around people. Came home one day and he was just sitting on the outrigger of the boat till I pulled up alongside to tie off. He took off, and then he came back later when I was cooking, and I'm like, oh shit. Okay, this is no good. Scare him off. He came back like 3 times after I scared him off the last time. He never came back again. Oh boy. It's getting close to 3. I have not seen an alligator all day today. They're out here, I know that. That baby's mama's living in the woods right across from me over there somewhere. And I know there's a big 15, 16 footer around the other cove. I'll leave her alone. All right, folks. Well, I think that's about as exciting as it's going to get for now. If anything happens, I'll try to catch it on camera. Till then, I'm going to log out and try to get some lunch started and maybe get some work done if it cools off a little bit. And y'all take care. Thanks for stopping in, and be good. Till next time.